Hey guys, today we're gonna go over a checklist. Basically, this is the checklist where I would start at. Like if I was, okay, big picture, where do I begin? Even before I kind of get into like starting a program, I wanna come up with a plan. And so this is kind of the initial plan in preparation to get things in order so we can start training hard and start testing ourselves and things. And so here's like kind of a big picture, and this is in like, I would say it's in kind of an order, but not, right? And these are just, it might change for certain things for people in their life situation. So the first one is really pretty straightforward, I think, and that's choose an appropriate timeline, okay? Well, like, okay, that sounds awesome, but how do we do that? Well, like you gotta take stock of your life. You know, what life situation, am I finishing school? Am I gonna, what's going on? That's what I'm saying. Like a lot of times that people will choose a timeline that's too short, or they say, I'm gonna do it in a couple years, and that timeline that's so long doesn't really have any incentive to it either, okay? So we choose our timeline. That's number one, choose your timeline. And that really kind of is the second part, is like, I'm gonna start choosing my timeline by testing myself. That's the part two, is take your test, take your PSTs, right? You don't have to take the whole thing, but begin testing yourself, because that test is what we look and what we evaluate and what we kind of crunch those numbers to begin making progress. Because we have to take a test, right? It's like, let's say it's math, right? You gotta take a test, see what your state of knowledge is. And then based on that test score, you see, well, I need to learn more in fractions, more in decimals, or whatever it might be. Same thing, the PST, because people, it's not uncommon that someone does pretty good in one of the parameters and some they don't do so well, right? So a lot of times there's things about that. So testing yourself so we can focus on your weaknesses. That's your big step there, is because once you've taken a test, we see our weaknesses. Now I go, okay, that's where kind of the psychological thing comes around now. Is like, okay, there tends to be a habit for a lot of people to test, when after their test, they kind of tend to stay on their strengths, because working your weaknesses can make you feel a little bit vulnerable, and it can make that timeline seem like kind of frightening, right? Is it too long? Is it too short? Am I trying to compact everything in too short of a timeline? Oh my God, right? And so what we want to do as part of that is, when we create that timeline, create one that's like, right? It should be acceptable for us to make a few mistakes along the way. But if our timeline is too short, right? We sometimes that mistake can be a little bit harder to get through or get around, or whatever it might be, whatever happens because of that unintentionally condensed timeline, okay? The third part is, and this is kind of why we do what we do, is I use an actual program that's based in experience, right? Like, you graduating BUD/S does not give a person experience. A guy going to the teams after graduating BUD/S and likes fitness, that is not experiential, right? I want to think of like, it's a weird place that so many people will try to get programming and teaching from somebody that, quite frankly, right, didn't do any deployments, just hung out on the beach, like weird stuff, right? Like, because you wear the trident doesn't mean you were a good SEAL, real at all. Or even, it's like, I always say it's the yoga pants. Just because you can put the pants on doesn't mean it fits you. So I would say, like, if you're gonna take someone's advice and training, number one, the biggest thing is they should be able to describe all of it. How they got the math, how they got their splits, where they derive their work volume, and their timeline. Like, why is this person's program 12 weeks long, or 10, or 6 months? There's got to be rationale behind it that's supported by mathematical experience, right? They should be able to give you clear definitions of what they're prescribing. It's math, right? Like, and if someone can't, we know they're guessing. And this point in the timeline of our lives and in training, we shouldn't be guessing about any of this, right? Like, we have high-speed cameras that look at the millimeters of space when someone's sliding into second base to see if they're safe. Millions of dollars in technology going to see if someone's safe at second. So, I mean, like, where's that disconnect, okay? We need to have that much focus into our training, because some of you are going to get bullets shot at you instead of baseballs. So we really, we owe it to ourselves to getting into an actual training program that gives you real scientific sort of throughput, okay? And that's the thing. And the next thing is like training. You know, the hard part about it is creating a training balance. So once we've tested ourselves, right, we get into a timeline, right? We know we're in a program. So what's the deal? Like, our big thing is, once we're actually training, once we're putting our feet on the ground, or getting in the pool, or getting onto the bar, and we're doing reps, when you start accumulating reps, your first goal is to create a balance. And what does that mean? So like if you're doing, in a week or 10 days when you're repeating your training cycle, you should not have to every week make changes because life is screwing you up or you're not choosing the right loads and the right volumes and distances. And that's why our stuff's in block format, so you can just drop those things in. And when you feel overwhelmed because you need an off day, we just slide that block over. It becomes an off day or becomes a focused recovery day, right? And that's kind of where we're going to get to here in a second, one of the big points. But once you have a good training balance, and that is saying I'm focused on my weaknesses, I'm not neglecting anything, my strengths are still in there, but they're not taking the priority of my time. That's what we're talking about. And that training balance is something that we can manage and measure, right? When we have balance, when things get a little off balance, being, oh shoot, I didn't take an off day, or oh man, like I had a busy work day, kind of argued with my boyfriend or girlfriend, like kind of some of my appetite went away and it didn't have the best training day. Oh, that's fine. That's going to be life. And we want that opportunity to slide that block over and we choose how that day should be. And so that's what the balance is a balance is something that isn't, that these little tweaks over time just make it better and better and better, right? If we don't have training balance, then when we start looking at your numbers and your notes, it's just kind of all over the place. It's like waking up and going to bed at a different time all the time. There's just chaos, right? So we don't want to do that. We want to find a balance, okay? The big problem with balance is the PST, guys. The PST is not a training tool. That is a hugest mistake in all of Spec War, is using the PST and its exercises to drive training, okay? The PST, if the PST was a training tool, we'd be all of us would be out of a job. We would just be doing push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups, running and swim every day. That's all we would do, okay? That doesn't work. It's never worked. It never will work. It never has worked, okay? So the PST is something that you use as a tool of testing. It is not a training tool, ever, on any circumstances. Even at like the last couple weeks into buds, your PSTs are never, ever, ever a training tool, ever. It's not something you should be doing on a daily basis or even a weekly basis or even really on a monthly basis. You should not be testing your PST more than about every 6 to 8 weeks, period. Like, it's ridiculous, and that's not it for discussion, okay? The next thing is prioritize recovery, right? What does that mean? What is the food? What is the sleep? What is the water? What is the spiritual, okay? Right? You've got to take care of yourself. If your food quality is low, you have not prioritized your sleep, your recovery. If your sleep is something that you're like, meh, then you've not prioritized it. If the water you're drinking is not something you're taking stock of its quality, you're not prioritizing recovery. And if you're not taking time to pray, to rest, relax, meditate, some version of taking care of yourself, if you're not doing that, you're also not prioritizing recovery. The closest thing to a guarantee we can get is prioritizing those things, because prioritizing food, sleep, your spiritual, and your water allows for a much more intense training environment with far more frequency. Okay? We're going to do these. Each one of these videos is almost its own topic, but the quality of food matters, the quality of your sleep, the quality of your breathing, the quality of your water, and the quality of the time you take for yourself and for your God is super important. So that is a necessity, not a, well, I'll focus on my eating and sleeping when I get there. Too late, man, too late, okay? Supplement enhancement is the next one, okay? Well, Jeff, I can't have supplements. Cool, but all supplements are derived from food. There's always a food source. So have you established what your food alternatives are going to be to manage inflammation, right? And sickness and illness, and that's where we're going right into it. The next big thing, have you managed the ability to fight illness, right? Fight off loss of appetite, and what's going on if that happens? What happens if you're fighting it and you're, SIPE, all these other things will happen, and there's a way to offset. If you're fighting off illness, there's a way to do it. There's absolutely a way to do that, okay? And it goes in line with managing inflammation. Are you managing inflammation in your training? Or are you just like, well, I'll just deal with it? Because while you're in training, now is the time to practice. Now is the time to go, oh man, my elbow is sore. How do I recover that so I can keep training? We want to practice this now, not when you get there, okay? It'll be too late, right? So take a look at these steps, get them in a good, manageable order, and you will see your big picture training will really, really improve.